My name is Carolyn Montoya, and today is December the 27th, 2008, and I will be interviewing my mother, Elizabeth Jean Stolarz, about her life stories and memories.
My name is Elizabeth Stolarz, and I'm 85 years old.
Okay, can you tell me about the time that your early childhood when you lived in Minneapolis?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about it that I remember is that Mother and Daddy came to Minneapolis with Grandpa Smith, Daddy's father, and Daddy and his father, my grandfather, started a barber shop in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Mother stayed home and raised children. And the main thing I like to remember is that Mother and Daddy were very happy and loving and kind, wonderful parents. And Grandpa was so sweet and so kind, and he was a dear man to me.
What was his name?
His name was Iris W. Actually, it's Iris Warren Smith. And he and his wife did not get along very well, which would be my dad's mother. So he came to live with us, and he helped Mother raise us children because Mama had Forrest, and he was a sick baby when he was born, and so Mother had to spend a lot of time taking care of Forrest. So Grandpa took care of me, and he would dress me and he bathed me, and he would sit down, and as I got older, he'd just sit out in the rocking chair, and he'd tell me all kinds of stories. I know he made them up as he went, but they were good stories. Sometimes he would tell, as I got older, he told me stories about his childhood and about how what the family was like. But I never had very many close contacts with my dad's side of the family because Grandma and Grandpa didn't get along. They fought like cats and dogs. And
Can you tell me about your brothers and sisters?
oh yes, I
Or
can.
your brothers, I'm sorry.
Yes, I can. I have no sisters,
Yeah,
Carol.
right.
I have brothers. And my oldest brother is Forrest, and he was named after Daddy, so he was a junior. And he was born, and Mama had an awful time when Forrest was born because she had uremic poisoning. And Forrest was born with a little bit of an eyesight problem. And then he was born about 2 years before I was, and then I was the next one along the line. And my name, I already told you, it's Elizabeth, and Mama named me after. I didn't know that at first, that Daddy named me after his grandmother, but he did. He named me after his grandmother, who was Elizabeth. And then there was my brother Forrest, and then the next one, the next one down would be Richard. And Richard was named after one of Mama's brothers. And also Grandpa Smith's middle name was Warren, so he was named after both grandfathers. And then there was Chuck, he was Charles Eugene Smith, and he was my youngest brother, and he was born with beautiful, beautiful red curly hair. And Mother kept his hair in curls all his life until he was ready to go to high school. Grade school. And then she had to have Daddy cut it, and she sat there while Daddy was cutting his hair and cried because she didn't want to lose his curls.
Tell me about what was your father doing there? Maybe you already mentioned that.
I did mention that, Carolyn.
Mm-hmm.
What he was doing is that Daddy learned to be a barber. At that time,
Okay.
you just had to have apprenticeship, and Grandpa Smith taught him how to barber, and so he worked under Grandpa for a while in Red Oak. And then when they moved when Mom and Dad got married and they went to Minneapolis to live, Daddy was a barber, and they had opened up a shop, and Dad and Grandpa both were barbers in the shop. But when my mother got sick, my Grandpa Smith stayed with us and help Mom take care of the kids, and so he didn't work in the barber shop any longer.
All right, when you went to Minneapolis, can you tell us how you got there? How did you travel?
Okay. Well, when Mom and Dad went up to Minneapolis, they had what they called a touring car at that time, and they had fixed some way in a touring car for them to have their barber supplies, so that on the way up to Minneapolis, we went with Grandpa Smith, by the way, and what they did is on going up there, they had very little money, and so they stopped at little towns along the way, and Daddy would do haircuts and sharpen knives and things like that for people in order for them to buy groceries so they could have something to eat and a place to sleep. So that's how we happened to get to Minneapolis.
How did Grandpa and Grandma meet?
My Grandpa Smith.
No, your mother and father. Where did they meet?
My mother and father. Well, my mother lived in Henderson, Iowa, and she was from a family of 10 children. Wait a minute, I think it was 9 children. And Mom loved to go to Red Oak. Her and Aunt Zora wanted to go to Red Oak to roller skate because they had a roller skating rink in Red Oak, Iowa. And so Grandma Walker, Mom's mother, was raised chickens for their own good, but she would sneak a chicken out from the chicken house and give it to my Mom to go to town and sell it so that she could have some money so they could go roller skating with Aunt Zora and her, go to Red Oak or by the train. The train went by there, and they stayed over at Red Oak and for the evening and would roller skate, and that's how Dad and Mom met. It was on the roller skating rink, and Daddy and Mom were partner skaters, and they were beautiful skaters, and that was instead of dancing, they were roller skating in those days.
Where were they married? When were they married?
They were married on Armistice Day, and I think that's November the 11th in 1916, I believe it was. Mom was just 16 years old when she and Daddy got married, and Mom's birthday is in 1900, so that was her birthday.
Okay, and so then they lived in Red Oak for a while?
Well, they stayed with Grandpa and Grandma for a while after they were married, but Grandma was such a wicked woman and nobody could stand her, and so they didn't stay there very long, but they did stay long enough for Mom to learn how to bake bread, because Grandma Smith was a good baker, and she could bake wonderful breads and pies, and she taught my Mom how to bake bread, and Mother always, all her life, was baking rolls and breads, and people were always wanting to have some of them because they were so good, and she learned to make pies, and they were beautiful pies and very tasty.
Tell me a little bit about Iris's Smith's religion. What kind of a religious person was he?
Grandpa Smith was a very religious man, and he lived it. He lived his life a religious man. And when he and Grandma were married, I used to go over, and when they were married, they moved into Red Oak, and I would go over to Grandpa's and Grandma's to visit with them. And when I would go upstairs, Grandpa would be there, and they'd be arguing. You could hear them fighting clear from out in the hallway. And that bothered Grandpa because he didn't want me to know that they didn't get along. And so Grandpa took me for a walk. He'd say, "Come on, Betty, let's go for a walk," because he didn't want me to be around Grandma. And so we went for a walk, and we stopped at a candy store on the way. It was a kind of a drugstore candy store. And he'd ask me what I wanted, what kind of candy I'd want. Well, me being so shy, I didn't know what to say to Grandpa, and I didn't want to ask for anything. So he says, "Well, how about some horehound candy?" And I said, "That's okay." And I knew what horehound candy tastes like. It was bitter. And Grandpa, I'd take one and I'd try to chew on it or suck on it, and Grandpa would say, "Are you ready for another one?" And I didn't know how to tell him that I really didn't like it. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. And we'd go over to the park where Grandpa met all his buddies. They all played games over there. They played chess and checkers and things like that. And I would just stay around the park there and play. And Grandpa would watch me. And I was going to tell you something else, and I forgot what all about his religion. Grandpa was a very, very religious man, and he's the one who taught me about religion when I was very young. And when he and Grandma would have troubles, he would go in the closet to pray and to think about the Lord and how he felt. Just had a quiet time with him and the Lord in his closet. And he taught me. I think he's the one who got me started as a child, wanting to go to church and wanting to participate in the things at the church.
Did Iris believe in medicine?
No, not at all. He didn't believe in anything in the way of medicine or medical care. He had his own home remedies that he used, like he'd take and make tea out of leaves and weeds and things, and boil them and make tea with them. And I don't know what they taste like because I never tasted them, but he believed in all kinds of old home remedies. And that was carried on by my dad. My dad believed the same way. And so it was a really hard childhood for me because my dad didn't believe in doctors and he didn't believe in dentists. So I had to wait till I got up and married before I got to see a doctor or dentist.
What did Iris and your dad do when before they were married? When your dad was young, what kind of things did they do?
Well, Grandpa used to take off and go someplace with Dad. He'd take Daddy and they'd go out to California, or they went over to, I think Hawaii was where they went. And I know that Daddy was old enough then that he bought a opal, and he wanted to give it to. By that time, he knew Mom, and so he wanted to give that opal to Mom, the opal ring to Mom for her engagement ring. And but they traveled all over by touring cars, and he'd take Daddy my grandpa would take Daddy out of school to go traveling with him, and so my daddy didn't get much of an education because Grandpa was taking him places all the time. In a way, I think Grandpa was escaping being with his wife, my grandmother.
Now, did your dad, did he have to go to school to learn to be a barber?
No, not in those days. You didn't have to, Carolyn. He was taught by his dad, and all he had to do was pass the license, and he got his own license, and he didn't have to go to school then. Everybody learned a trade, and they called it learning a trade.
So all the children were born in Minneapolis?
Yes, Forrest and Richard and myself and Chuck.
All right, and after you left Minneapolis, where did you go?
We went to Malvern, Iowa. And the reason we went to Malvern is because Grandma Walker got very, very sick. And so Grandpa Walker called Mom up or wrote her a letter or whatever. In those days, I don't know what they used. But anyway, he got in touch with Mother, and Mother agreed to come home and take care of Grandma. So
What was Grandma's name?
Cora Ann Walker.
Okay. And can you tell me, where did you live in Malvern at that time?
Well, at that time when we first went there, we stayed with Grandpa and Grandma, and Mom took care of Grandma in the home. And Daddy opened up a barber shop in town, so he drove back and forth. It was only about 1.5 miles to Grandpa's house, so he would drive back and forth to the barber shop. But when Grandma passed away, then Mom was staying on the farm, but Grandpa Walker got married again right away after Grandma died, and so Mom didn't appreciate being around this lady taking the place of her mother. So Mom took us kids and Dad, and we went into town and rented an old house there.
When did you live up above you lived up on a second story above some stores or something
Oh, yes.
in Malvern?
Oh, yes. When we lived in Malvern, after we moved into Malvern, Daddy found out that from the owner of the building that there was an apartment above the barber shop, and that we could rent it from him at a low cost because we had the barber shop below. And so we lived there in Malvern, in the right on Main Street.
I think the stories about your mom when she was sewing, and some of the stories about when they would go out would be interesting.
Okay, I'll tell you about the sewing. That's the most. That's one of the good things is that my mother came from a family of sewers. Her sister was an excellent sewer and did dresses for all the rich ladies in Henderson. And Mom learned from her sisters how to sew. And so she always made all my clothes, and she made my daddy's dress shirts that looked just like they were bought from a department store. And she would go to a secondhand store somewhere or a rummage store and find coats that she could turn wrong side out and make our winter coats for us. And she would stay up night after night sewing on her sewing machine while Daddy was keeping the barber shop open. And and Mother also did baking. She learned to be a good baker from Grandma Smith. She taught her how to make the bread and the pies and things. And so the restaurant across the street from the barber shop needed someone to bake homemade pies to sell. So they asked Mom if she would do that, and Mother gladly was willing to do that. And every Saturday, our dining room table was just loaded with pies for the restaurant. And all during the week, she would bake breads, and we called them cloverleaf buns. And the boy across the street that was the grocer's boy used to love to come over and sit on the steps of our apartment when Mom was baking bread, because he knew that he was going to get a cloverleaf bun with butter on it, and he was. So then Mother was like the people that had the grocery store, which was this boy's father and mother, and she would send some rolls over to them to have for their meal. And everybody in the town of Malvern knew my mom was a wonderful baker.
Now, going back to the sewing, did she use a pattern to sew?
No, none at all. She just looked at a dress or had an idea of a dress and would draw a design and make them. She cut them out by her own, no pattern.
I think I remember you telling me about that Grandpa would say to get ready because they were going to go to a dance, and what would she do to get ready?
Oh, yes. Well, Daddy would be, on a Saturday night, the barber shop was always so busy, but Daddy always told Mom, get ready, because we're going to go to Randolph or all different towns around there, but I think of Randolph because that's where they most generally went. But Mother would know that Daddy wanted her to look nice, so she'd go up to the fabric store, which was the part of the grocery store, and she'd buy the fabric to make a dress, and she'd come home and get out her sewing machine, and she'd make her dress, and so she could have it done in time to go to a dance. And she looked so beautiful. Mama would wash her hair, and she didn't have wave set in those days. Mom had naturally curly hair, wavy hair actually, and so she would make this solution of these grains. I forgot what kind of grains they were, but the flaxseed, that's what it was, flaxseed, and she'd mix that with a perfume, and so it would smell good, and she'd put that on her hair and curl her hair, and so it stay in nice. And she looked so nice when she went with Daddy, and Daddy looked good too. He was always dressed. Daddy was always dressed up as long as he had the barber shop.
Tell me about your how you would celebrate like Christmas when you were a child, or one of your best Christmases as a child.
One of my best Christmases was when we lived up above the barber shop, and Daddy knew we didn't have any money to buy much of anything, but on Saturday night, or the day before Christmas, I should say, they would go over to, Mom and Dad would go over to Red Oak, Iowa, and when they were selling all their decorations at half price, or below, at a bargain price anyway, and he would decorate the apartment. And one thing he did, he'd take cardboard. I don't know how he did it, but he took cardboard and made a mantle, made a fireplace, a fake fireplace, and made a mantle, and we put candles on the mantle, and he'd take and make a make-believe fire in the fireplace, and we'd sit around, and Daddy and Mom would go over to Red Oak to get got us what he could afford to buy us for Christmas, and maybe it was clothes sometimes, and maybe it was a sled for 4 people, 1 sled, or roller skates for 1 pair for all of us 4 children, because we didn't have the money to buy for everyone individually.
Tell me about how you and Dick would share the skates.
Oh my, the skates or the roller skates. Well, Dick would get out of school about the same time I did, because he wasn't far behind me in school. And we'd run home to see who could get there first and get the skates, because Daddy could only afford to buy 1 pair of skates. And so it was roller skates that we shared. And then another thing too, Dick and I seemed like we always wanted to be together, and we always enjoyed doing things together, and we laugh and joke, and we had fun. And when I got a little older, I wanted to learn to ice skate. So Daddy had a pair of ice skates when he was young, and he saved them. And he had my daddy didn't have large feet, so we'd take his ice skates and that he had as a child, and we'd go down to the old Beaner Pond, and we'd ice skate, and Dick would get mad at me because I wouldn't let him have the skates. He wanted to skate part-time, and I got there first, so I skated till I got tired, and I gave them to him to do. And we spent all of our winters down on the old Beaner Pond, and then after that, we also had 1 sled for 4 of us, and Dick and I would go up to the block off that they had up by where Mom and Dad had their grocery store in later life, that hill. They blocked that off, and Dick and I would go up there, and after we had our dinner that night, well, we'd go up to the block off, and we'd stay up there till we about froze to death, and then we'd go home. But we had more fun, and there was more kids there. And they started a big bonfire down on the end of the run. And we'd stay there and warm ourselves.
Did you sled down toward the town or down the other side?
We sled down by the store. You know where Mom had the grocery store there? Well, that hill.
Yeah, that was a big hill.
Across from the catty-corner from the schoolhouse.
Okay. All right. Now in the summertime, what'd you do for fun?
For fun, swimming pool. That was the fun. I never will forget when they opened up the Beaner Pond. Mr. Beaner donated that beautiful swimming pool. It was a big swimming pool and had nice rooms, shower rooms and things, and we would go swimming. Well, Aunt Zora came over with Uncle Eddie to Mom and Dad's place, and it was the 4th of July, and we celebrated the 4th of July at the house, and then we all went swimming, including my mom, who was scared to death of water. And when we found out that the swimming pool was open, they went up to Ma Holland's grocery store, and it had a department store, and they bought these cotton swimming suits for all of us, and we all went swimming, including Aunt Zora and Uncle Eddie and Mom and Dad and all us kids. And Mom was scared to death of the water. She wouldn't get it up over her knees.
So she never did get her suit wet, huh?
Oh, and I thought I could fool him, so I pretended like I was swimming because I wanted to be able to tell Daddy I could go swimming, and he would let me go by myself. So I pretended like I was swimming by putting one arm down and the next arm down and the next arm down. touching the bottom, but I couldn't never get out in the deep water because I couldn't swim. But they thought I could swim, and Daddy kept telling everybody, boy, my daughter can swim. So that's.
Okay. When you were growing up in Malvern, who were some of your friends?
Well, the main friend was Carolyn Beaner, and that's why I named my daughter Carolyn after her. Is because she was so pretty. She had beautiful blonde wavy hair, and she was very, very pretty girl. And I said if I ever had a daughter, I was going to name her Carolyn, and that's just what I did. I named Carolyn Joanne, and it's really Joan, Carolyn Joan, and I named her after another good friend of mine, Joan, that lived up on Marion Avenue, the rich street, and so that's why I named Carolyn Joanne after her. I always say Joanne Carolyn, but it's Joan.
Were the streets paved in Malvern? Like down through the main street, was that paved when
Yes,
you were growing up?
All the time I was living there, it was
Okay.
always paved, yes.
Now, can you remember or tell a story about a teacher or something that happened in school that you remember?
I remember quite a few of those things because I was always on the carpet about something. 'Cause I was naughty. I was really naughty. Well, having three brothers, how can you help but be naughty? Because you had to fight your way through. Anyway, I had one teacher in my first or second grade, I don't remember, because when we lived out at Grandpa Walker's place, I went to country school. And I was doing something I wasn't supposed to do with my little inkwell and my little scroll pen, and so I was playing around with it. So the teacher made me stand up in front of everybody, holding on to that inkwell with my pen in there, sucking it on my mouth, and I was really embarrassed. But I guess I learned that I don't do that anymore because she was very strict. And then the other thing I remember about school is I loved Malvern High when I went to school there, because I made a lot of good friends, and we had lots of fun. And one friend, Madeline, went swimming. She was kind of like a tomboy, just like me. We'd go swimming together, and then we also in the wintertime she had ice skates, and we'd go down to the rink and down to pond and ice skate. And then she also had a sled, which I never got to have. It was kind of a different kind of a sled. So no, she had the skis and I had the sled. That's the way it was. So she had these little short skis, and I wanted to try them. And so she said, well, she says, I'll take your sled and you take my skis. So I learned to ski down that hill at the golf course in Malvern. And I always thought that if I could ever get to Colorado and go skiing, I'd love to learn to ski, because I really enjoyed that time with her on that skiing.
Was there a movie theater in town when you were growing
Yes.
up?
Oh yeah, there was a good movie theater, and that was a fun thing to do. We'd all go, all the kids from my high school that I liked would be there at the theater, and we'd, after the theater, we'd go up to what they called a ice cream parlor. I forgot it had a name, but I can't think of the name of it, but we'd all go up there, and the high school kids. And one time I was we was at the movies, and I was sitting by this new kid in town, which all the girls was crazy about. Everybody was trying to get him, and he happened to sit by me, and I never made any overtures to him, so he knew he's safe by me. But one of the girls came over and she whispered in my ear. She said, if I would let her sit in that seat, she would invite me to her a party that they were going to have at their house. Well, anyway, she never invited me, but she got to sit by him. That's one thing I remember about that. But I also remember Dad taking me to see the movies. So he liked to go to cowboy movies. And so in the afternoon on a matinee, if he wasn't doing anything, he'd take me to the movies there in Malvern. But it was a real good place to grow up. Malvern was really a good place. Into Silver City. When Mother and Father had the barber shop there in town, Mother was selling insurance, and Daddy had the barber shop, of course, and the people across the street kept talking to Mom about starting a grocery store. You ought to go up to Silver City and start a grocery store. And they were Jewish people, and folks were good friends with them. And so they encouraged Mom and Dad to go up and see about starting a grocery store in Silver City. So they went up and they found a building and got the price was right for the rent, and so they decided they were going to start a grocery store. And so we all moved up to Silver City, which was to my chagrin because I really didn't want to move from Melbourne. I was very happy there, but I moved up there with folks, and it was very hard for me during that summer because I didn't know anyone, and there wasn't anything to do. There was no theater there. There was no roller skating rink, no ice skating rink, nothing. Just a town, just a small town. But when school started, things changed for me. I got to know the kids and liked it, and we played basketball, and that was one of my favorite things to do, is to play basketball. But what really happened after I moved to Silver City was that I was riding around with Mom and Dad over the town just to see what it was like, and we stopped to get gas. And when we stopped to get gas, this boy came out to wait on us. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I thought he looked pretty good to me. And so when he was washing them, he took and washed all the windows in the car. I know he did this because he wanted to see what I was like. And so he got in, he looked in at the back rear view mirror, a window at me, and I thought, that don't look bad to me, I'll try that one. And so, and a few weeks later, he happened to be coming up to the grocery store after he closed the station, and he was talking around with all of us. We was all having a bunch of us together, and he says to me, he says, "Do you think I could get a date with you?" And I said, "No." I said, "I don't think so, because I don't think my folks would let me date." And he said, "Well, go ask them." So I went and asked Mom and Dad if I could date Don Ord. And they says, I guess so, you're old enough if you want to go. So I was so surprised that they were going to let me do that, and so I went out and told Don that, well, my folks gave me the okay to go out with you, and so he says, well, he made a date with me that night, and I don't know where we went, but anyway, it was a continued relationship, and I finally married Don.
Can you tell me about your marriage? When you first, when you got married and when it was, where it was?
Well, we got married in Papillion, Nebraska, because I wasn't old enough in the state of Iowa to be married. So we went to Papillion, Nebraska to get married. And then after we were married, he stayed at his folks and I stayed at my folks, because I was afraid to tell my folks I was married, because they would have been very angry with me if they'd have known I was going to do that without their consent. But anyway, then I got pregnant with Carolyn, and that's when I finally had to tell the folks, because I was starting to show that I was going to have a baby, and so they said, I forgot how they said that to me, but they seemed to enjoy the fact that I was going to have a child. And then when I did have Carolyn, well, Mom and Dad were so thrilled. They're so thrilled, and they used to show her off to everybody and proudly say, "This is my granddaughter." And Carolyn was not a disappointment to them. She was very much an enlightenment for them, that they really enjoyed.
When was Carolyn born, and where was she born?
She was born at the Omaha Hospital. I forgot, Clarkson. I don't remember the name of the hospital, but it was a small little hospital at that time. And she was born on June 4th, 1942.
I think it was St. Catherine's.
St. Catherine's, that's right,
Mm-hmm.
Carolyn. It's a little tiny church, there's hospital. I'll get it out in a minute here.
Did you have any prenatal care?
None.
Did you have a hard time having Carolyn?
Yes. I spent 2 days and 2 nights with labor pains, and finally when it was time for Carolyn to be born, the nurse got up and sat on my feet, my legs, after having them up for 2 days, it was really terrible to bear to go in, and I didn't have any. They didn't do anything for me. They just let me lay there and have Carolyn, and Carolyn was a turn baby, and I had to turn her. She was breech baby.
So what were your thoughts when you saw Carolyn for the first time?
Oh, I loved the heck out of her. I loved her so much, and I was so overjoyed that I had a daughter. I wanted a daughter in the worst way, and I named her after my school friend, Carolyn Peener, and they'd bring Carolyn in to me to nurse her, and I'd hold her in my arms and look at her, and I just kept saying, oh, she's got a little three-cornered mouth, just like a little diaper mouth. She was so precious and so pretty, and I was so proud, and Don was so proud. Now it's going to make me cry.
Oh, don't cry. Where were you living when Carolyn was born?
Well, we moved to Silver City. We lived in Omaha for a while, and then when I found out that I was going to have Carolyn, we moved back to Silver City, and I can't remember exactly where we moved to, but I think we lived with Mom and Dad for a while, and then we rented a house on the outside, just the outskirts of Silver City, and lived there, and that's where I raised Carolyn when she was a little girl. And then I got pregnant with Donetta, and I had Donetta 11 months after Carolyn was born. And
What day was Donetta born on?
she was
What was the date?
May the 2nd in 1942.
43.
43, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
That's all right. That's been a long time ago, huh?
Yes, and she was
Okay.
also a beautiful, beautiful baby. And she was a ornery little stinker, though. She cried all the time. But yet Carolyn never cried. That's one thing about raising Carolyn. I never had any trouble. But when Donetta come along, I'll tell you, that was a little feisty child. But she was just she was just being herself.
So did you enjoy being a mom?
Oh, very much. I loved it. Loved it.
What were the best times, the things you remember most?
Well, I remember the best times was when we were living up in the house down from the schoolhouse, and the girls were up in grade school, and we did lots of things. We went to everything that they had in that town, and I remember living next door to Aunt Ezzie, and how Aunt Ezzie was so good to Carolyn and Donetta. And I remember taking the girls roller skating as they got older, and swimming. We went swimming over at Glenwood about every week, but maybe every 2 or 3 times a week. And we'd take a carload of kids and go swimming.
Well, how did the girls learn to swim?
Well, I don't remember, to be honest with you, Carolyn. How did you learn to swim? Did I teach you how?
Well, what did you do?
I taught swimming for the Red Cross for 8 years.
So we spent a lot of time in the pool in the
All the
summertime.
Yeah, all summer long.
Yes.
I would take a whole load of kids, and we'd go swimming every 2 or 3 times a week.
Okay. What did you enjoy about your home, being at home, being a
I
homemaker?
I loved being home, and I loved raising the kids, and I loved making their dresses and all the clothing that I could make. And I didn't have lessons like a lot of people have nowadays. I think if I remember right, when I started making Carolyn's dresses, I might have had a little pattern of some kind. But anyway, I learned. I know I didn't do them right. They weren't. Now that I know more about sewing, I know that they probably weren't sewed the best in the world, but I always tried to embroidery on them or something to make them look special.
Tell about Dad buying you a sewing machine.
Oh my gosh, that was the day. That day, I told him I wanted a sewing machine so bad, and so we went up to Omaha, and Council Bluffs, and I thought we'd just buy a Singer sewing machine, but I didn't think it'd be anything great. But we went up, and he saw the different sewing machines, and they demonstrated them to him, and he bought the best one in the store. And he bought me the best cabinets you could get. And when he brought that home, I tell you, I was so proud and so happy, because I've been sewing on a pedal machine for a long time. And I guess he knew that I really enjoyed sewing, and so he wanted me to have that.
Can you tell us something about what our Christmas was like when we lived there?
Oh yes, when we lived there, we really celebrated Christmas. I'll tell you, we decorated our house. Donetta and Carolyn would have a little to do about decorating the tree. She'd want Carolyn wanted popcorn, and Donetta didn't want popcorn strung and put on the tree, and so they had a little tiff about that. But we had so much fun at Christmas time. We went to church and went to the Christmas Eve programs, and they always took part in the program, both the girls. And then one night I remember Aunt Zora and Uncle Eddie came over, and Chuck was home from school, and he wasn't married then, he was just a young gentleman. And so we all of us went, including Eddie and Uncle Aunt Zora, went to church and watched the kids' program. And then coming home, there wasn't enough room in one car for all of us to ride, so Chuck and I walked home. It was in the snow. The snow was coming down. It was so beautiful. I'll never will forget that night. And we came home, and Aunt Zora was there, and Carolyn was sitting on Aunt Zora's lap as usual. And they were laughing and joking and having a good time. She always wanted Carolyn to sit on her lap. And then she'd get Donetta on one lap, and she'd get Carolyn on one side, and they'd sit there and they'd laugh and tell jokes, and it was a real wonderful time. And then one time one Christmas I remember so special, was that Don and I had figured out one thing we wanted to get for the girls for Christmas, and that was a phonograph record player. Well, we got a phonograph record player. It was also a radio. And so we brought it home, and we hid it up in the closet. And what do you know? Donetta goes in the closet, and she finds all the Christmas presents. And so there was no surprise to her. She knew what she was getting. And but it was one of the happiest Christmas when it was the year that they got the phonograph record.
Tell about what it was like when television came to our town.
Oh my gosh, television! I'll never forget that. We never had a television set, even though Don sold them in the store. We never got one. And so we'd go over to Aunt Essie's on Saturday night with Carolyn and Donetta in their sleepwear and their hair up in curlers for church the next day. So we'd go, and we'd never had a television set for some time because your dad sold them. But one day he decided, I guess it was time to get a family television set. So here comes one night, here comes Don with a pickup, and there was a big television set on the back end, and he unloaded that thing, and it was so beautiful, and I was so happy to have this, and it was a pretty one. It was a light colored wood, and it was a big screen, and it was just, we spent more time in front of that television on Saturday nights sitting there watching all the shows. I can't think of the shows we saw, but I know that and the kids used to, what was it
Howdy Doody.
Howdy Doody, and then also
Sky King.
What was that one?
Roy Rogers.
Yeah, what was that one where they danced?
Oh, American Bandstand with Dick
American
Clark.
Bands. I'd love to watch that,
Uh-huh.
and I'd get up and I'd say to Carolyn, "This is the way you do that," and so she would pay attention, and then Donetta got, so she was watching real close, and she said, "That's not the way you do it," and she got up and taught Carolyn how to dance her way. She would lead and Carolyn would follow.
Now you've mentioned an Aunt Ezzie. Was she really an aunt? Who was Aunt Ezzie?
Aunt Ezzie was my best neighbor, and she wasn't our aunt, but everybody called her Aunt Ezzie. She was an older lady. She used to be a house mother out at Lincoln, Nebraska, at the college there.
Okay.
And she had lots of friends, and she was so good to me, and she was so good to the girls. that we'd go over and spend a lot of time with her, especially in the evenings when Don had the store open late.
Now, what kind of business did he have?
Grocery business.
All right.
He took over Mom and Dad's grocery store.
Okay, and so because he was gone so much of the time, what were some of your duties around the house?
My duties around the house, well, let's see. How about mowing, what was it, almost a half acre? And the other thing that I remember real well is painting the house. I had to take and scrape it all, and I had to prime it, and then I had to undercoat it, and then I had to coat it, and then we had this. And then one day we got the screens on the front porch, and Don and I both painted the screens together. We got the screens up, but it was quite a chore, I'll tell you. And then and mowing the lawn, we didn't have the mowers like they had now. They had the kind you push. And then we finally got a gas-powered mower.
What were your activities in the community of Silver City? What kind of things did you participate in?
In Silver City, let's start out with the one in Glenwood, Iowa. I was taught Red Cross swimming for 8 years in the Glenwood pool. But I was at Eastern Star Point. I was Martha, and then I was president of the Band Mothers Club, and we bought new uniforms. We made enough money. We did it. We put on dances and all kinds of things to make money to buy the band uniforms, and we got good band uniforms. They were very well constructed, and and I was at the church. I forgot what I had, but I had an office in the church group, and I can't.
Other than the band, did you hold any office of the PTA?
Oh yeah, oh yes. I forgot what office I held, but I did hold an office there. I think I was. I don't remember. I wasn't president of the PTA. I was whatever, vice president or whatever. I don't know, Carolyn.
Now, since we were kind of isolated in Silver City, and we wanted to go shopping, how did we get there?
Oh, that was very good. We'd go down and catch the train and come in at 8 o'clock on Wabash, and we hop the train and go clear up to Omaha. Take us up clear up to Omaha. We'd get out in Omaha, and we'd have to walk about 2 blocks, and we'd be in downtown Omaha. And we'd go out, we'd do our shopping that way. That's how we got around. And sometimes we didn't go all the way to to Omaha. We'd stop in Council Bluffs and shop. And then the train would leave about 5 o'clock at night, so we had the whole day to shop and do whatever we wanted to do.
Now, I know in the wintertime, since we didn't have paved roads, it would be hard to get out of town to go shopping. But did you go?
That is funny. Well, I'll tell you what I did. I had we had a one-seater car at the time. It was I don't know what they called them then, but it was one seat, and so I'd take and go. I wanted to go shopping, and if the roads were real bad, it wouldn't make any difference. I'd go anyway, and I remember going up shopping one day, and it was mud on the roads. They didn't have the roads graveled at that time, and boy, I'd go up that one hill, a slippery slide all around, but I finally made it. I got all the way into town and got my shopping done and came on home. But
let's go back a little bit to before you were married and you were living in Silver City, and your parents had the store there.
Oh,
and
yes.
What kind of things what was your life like then, and what were you doing to help out?
Okay. Well, my life in Silver City was different, I'll have to say. Different than most kids have it. Since Mom and Dad were both working in the store, there was nobody in the family that could do the housework, so guess what? I got the job. And I did all the washing, all the ironing, and kept up the apartment that folks had behind the store. and I tried to go to school and try to practice basketball, and it just was so busy all the time. I never had any time for myself.
I remember when we were little, living up above the store.
Yes.
What was that like? How
Horrible. Absolutely horrible.
What made it so hard?
Well, first of all, you don't have a bathroom upstairs. And the only thing you've got is you've got to go down the stairs in the back and to go between two buildings. One is the beer joint and the other one's your grocery store. And so if you had to go to the bathroom, you had to walk out and use the same thing that all the drunks used from the tavern next door. And so I always kept something upstairs for the kids to use, so I didn't have to take them down there. I wasn't about to take them down there, but what comes to mind was one thing is that when we lived up there, I used to put the girls to bed at their bedtime, and then I'd sit out in the kitchen and with the lights off and watch the people downstairs. And I saw this one lady, I forgot what her name was, and that doesn't make any difference, but she'd be in there drinking with her husband in the beer joint next door. And so she'd get a little bit teed, and she'd go out and she'd have to go to the bathroom, so she just had a jug in her in the car that they parked out there, and she'd go to the bathroom and throw it out the window.
How did you do laundry, and how did we take baths? Did we have running water?
No, no. I carried the water up and down the stairs. That's how we got it.
Where'd you get it?
At the well. We had a well with a pump right there on Main Street, and I carried the water up to put on the fire to heat for the washer, and then I carried the water up to rinse of clothes in two big tubs of water, and then when I got through with it, well, I carried it back down and threw it out in the drain. But
what did you worry about when we lived up there?
I was worried about fire. I was scared to death of fire because that was a fire trap. And if I don't know what we would have done if we'd had a fire, because there wouldn't have been any way out. The only one stairs was the ones where it would start a fire in between the two buildings. So
I remember on Sundays. Sundays were always family day, and
Yes.
so what would we do for fun on Sunday?
well, we do for fun on Sunday. Well, Don would take and get his work done, whatever he had to do, and he'd come home, and we'd be all dressed, and we'd go to Omaha, and we'd go eat out at a place there that had I forgot now what it was that we liked so well.
Pickled beets.
Pickled beets, that's it, pickled beets. Carolyn loved pickled beets. Anyway, we would go up to this one place. It was a home cafe was the name of it, and this lady cooked home food, and it was delicious. And so we'd go up there and have our dinner, our afternoon meal, and then after that we'd go over to Omaha. And your dad loved to go to shows, so we went to see a good show, and then on the way home we stopped off at the place where they made pizzas. What was the name of that place, Carolyn?
Oh, you mean the Maid Right?
No, the one
No,
in Omaha.
Oh, Canaglias.
Canaglias, that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
We used to go there on Sundays too, and your daddy one day, he says to you, he says, Carolyn, you'd like to try this? And Carolyn says, yeah. So I said, oh, no. And he says, oh, yes. He says, so he gave her a taste of it, and she went, ooh, awful.
What was that?
Huh?
What was that? I had a taste
The
of?
taste of your dad's drink.
Oh, his
He had
drink.
always had a drink.
Okay.
You know, a liquor
Yeah,
of some kind.
yeah. All right. So the times that we were growing up in Silver City and you were living there, that was the years would have been 1942 till
1941, honey.
1941.
December 41.
Okay, 41. And then when we left there, it was about...
No, I beg your pardon, I'm wrong about that,
Yeah.
Carolyn. That was before that time because I graduated in 41, so
Okay.
it'd be about 39. We moved up there in 1939.
Okay.
Yes.
And then when we left there was about 1957.
I left there in 1950.
I was
yes,
yeah.
no,
19
1957.
Okay.
But I was working in Omaha at the time, driving back and forth, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to move up there, because I didn't like that drive.
Uh-huh.
So,
Okay.
and Mother wanted a place to live, so Mom came over with me, and we went scouting for houses in Council Bluffs, and we found this house on Benton Avenue, and the girls loved it because they had their own room and upstairs, and it was close to school, so they could walk to school.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about Dad's family?
Oh yeah, I can tell you a lot about Dad's family. When you were just a child, or I would say that shortly after Don and I were married, and he went to the service, Dad let us live, let you and I and Donetta live in a house where it was right next door to the Ord family. And so Grandma Ord, one of the things I'll never forget about Grandma Ord, I'm going back now to the time when I was we first had you. I was living with the folks for a while after you were born, and Grandma Ord I'd go hang out at the wash for Mom and Dad, and Grandma Ord would always say, Betty, she'd say, you don't hang those clothes up, because like that on those high wires, or you strangle your baby. And I had no idea what she was talking about, because I was very ignorant about having a baby. Nobody taught me anything. And but anyway, Grandma would take care of you girls every time I wanted to go someplace. She'd offer to take care of you because you were good kids and you minded her very well.
How many children did they have?
They had 14.
So Dad was one of 14
Oh
children.
yes, he was. He was.
Okay.
Your daddy, when he worked in Mineola while we were married too. He worked in mechanic in Mineola for a while, and he worked as a 7-Up salesman for a while.
That's when you were first married.
Yeah, that's when we were first married.
Okay.
And he worked in but when we were first married, he worked for Shirley Hendricks in the gas station there.
Okay. So there's so many stories to tell. We could do this. We might have to spend some more time doing this.
But I'll tell you something. I've always been, even though Don and I weren't together at the end, I was very close to him, even after we were divorced. He always meant so much to me because he was the father of my daughters, and after I came out here to live, after I went to California and came out here to live, I got better acquainted with Don, and we had a good friendly relationship with him. There was never any evil thoughts or any bad thoughts. It was just one of those things that happened.
Okay.